Welcome to this week's episode of Tiny Pulpit Talks, First Unitarian Church of Dallas's podcast. I am Reverend Beth Dana, your Minister of Faith Development, and I'm so happy to be here with you for this Ask a Minister version of the podcast. Thank you, everybody, for sending in the questions that you sent in. They were wide-ranging, and so I will not be addressing all of them in this episode, but you've given us a lot of material to consider and to respond to in the coming weeks. So I have a few that I wanted to respond to today, some just very fun and light and airy, and some a little more weighty about Unitarian Universalism. But the first one that I want to begin with, the question that was directed, I think, towards me was, if you hadn't gone into ministry, what career would you have pursued? Which is a great question. I went into ministry basically right after college, but there are some other things that I considered. When I was in college and the work that I was doing in Unitarian Universalism at the time, I had some mentors that were kind of organizational change consultants, facilitators for like groups and nonprofits and that sort of thing. So I thought about doing something like that. And I got a little bit of experience in that area just through various things that I was doing, which has actually ended up serving me well in a number of ways. All those skills are good ones for ministry as well. So that was one thing I considered. I also had a job during college that I loved in museum education. It was this fairly new museum in a historic Jewish synagogue in New York, where as an intern, basically, student worker, they gave me incredible responsibility and freedom to create educational materials that would basically be accessible to a wider, diverse audience that was not just Jewish. And that was so fun. And again, a lot of relevant skills and knowledge and material to ministry as well. But museum education is something I considered. And I've always joked that if ministry doesn't work out, my backup job will be opening a tea shop, because I love tea. I love drinking tea. I love learning about tea. I collect teapots. So I would open a tea shop. So another question that I got, and I would assume that this question is coming to me because of my role as Minister of Faith Development, where I'm working with our team on education and learning and growth and faith development for children through adults. But this one is specifically about youth. And so somebody asked, what do you advise parents when they tell you that their high school age kids who participated in church school for many years no longer want to come to youth group or church? Now, this is a question I've gotten before. It's a common one. And I will say it's common for teenagers to push back against this sort of thing. So whoever asked this question, just know that you're not alone. But the first thing I would say is, have you asked them why? It would be interesting to hear from their perspective a little more than just, I don't want to go. Try to get at what's behind that. Have they developed friendships at church? I think for so many young people, especially teenagers, having friends and feeling like this is a community where they have meaningful friendships is so important, because it's an age where teens are differentiating themselves from their parents, and friends become even more important. And so that's a big reason a lot of teenagers come to church as friends. It's the reason a lot of adults come to church too, but especially important at that age. And just developmentally, teens are also like, they want to be independent, but they also want to belong to a group. And so if this is a place where they can practice independence and make their own choices, and explore leadership, which is a big part of our youth program here at the church, but also feel like they belong, this could be a really meaningful place for them, to be able to kind of build this community that is also a place where their parents go, but where they're also building a community that is their own. there's kind of a shift when youth enter YRUU, Young Religious Unitarian Universalists, our youth group, where it's a lot more youth-led. And so all that YRUU does is really driven by our youth leaders in partnership, of course, with our adult advisors. But there's a lot of independence and the community and sense of belonging that youth are seeking. And so if there are young people who are considering whether to, as they're moving into that age group, whether they're considering whether they want to go to YRU or not, I always say, give it a try and see what you think, because it may be different than what you're expecting. But I will also say that while, of course, we hope that teens will make the choice to come to church and want to come to church, that it's important for them to be able to make choices of their own too, especially at that age. And there are some teens who come to church and don't go to youth group, but are involved in our church community in so many other meaningful ways, whether it's going to worship with their family or their friends, or volunteering. Some of our teens work with our younger kids, or they volunteer in other ways, or they serve coffee during coffee hour. You know, there are so many different ways of being meaningfully involved in our church community. And of course, we hope that they find a home and a place to belong in the youth group, but it's not for everybody. And so that's kind of my encouragement to you, is to find out some more and to encourage them to make choices that are the best for them, but also encourage them to find meaningful ways to be involved here, even if it's not in the youth group. So I hope that that's a helpful response to that question. Somebody else asked a great question. Can you share a particularly memorable or impactful moment from your ministry, from my ministry? And of course, that is so hard to answer because there are so many. I think a big one was being ordained in this church. This was the church that in 2015 made me a reverend, basically. I was a young minister who was not formally ordained yet when I first came here, and the congregation voted to ordain me, to kind of bestow that blessing and that title and that vote of confidence, in a way, in my ministry, and to be a part of that as a congregation as a whole was really, really meaningful. And the service and the ceremony were just beautiful, and I will never, ever forget them. So that was a really big one. But there's so many others. I mean, I think about seeing a lot of big projects that I've worked on in the church coming to fruition has also been really meaningful and impactful. I mean, the most recent one, of course, being our new playgrounds, which are super wonderful and fun and exciting, and we're a couple of years in the making. But there's other things like the Faith Forward program that I've worked on, and particularly the spiritual leadership path, which we're just in the second year of doing, which are things that were dreamed of before I actually even came to the church. But I've had the privilege of getting to be a really big part of making those a reality, and making those something that our church is growing and benefiting from, and that other UU churches are as well. So that's been an incredible thing to be a part of. Another thing I thought about was getting to celebrate marriage equality with this church, and what a momentous occasion that was, both personally and professionally and just in general, living in Dallas and in the United States at that time, when the Supreme Court made it legal nationwide. Being in a same-sex marriage myself, it was very personally impactful. But getting to be your minister during that time in a church that has worked for so many years to make that right available to everybody was really amazing. And then I'll just say that there have been so many smaller moments spent with people, accompanying people through the ups and downs of life, that have been incredibly meaningful, impactful to me personally and as a minister. And it's these kind of just often very ordinary moments that are really what fuel my ministry and that I really love about being your minister and being a minister in a congregation like this. So that's a lot of memorable and impactful moments of my ministry, and there's more that I could say, but there's a little nutshell answer to that one. So there's a question about thinking ahead. Churches tend to do a lot of planning and preparation in the summer. What are you most looking forward to for the 2024-2025 church year? There's a lot to look forward to. And so I'll just mention a couple things. But one that's coming up really soon is welcoming our new music director, Grant Wareham. I am so excited to work with him. He is a very gifted musician and a wonderful person, and I can't wait for our whole congregation to get to know him. And I'm looking forward just to collaborating with him on worship and music. Another thing is in my work as Minister of Faith Development, I'm looking forward to this year doing some kind of big picture dreaming and strategizing around our curricula for children and for children and young teens, and how we are doing faith development and the resources that we're using, because there's some new stuff out there that's exciting, and so exploring how we can adapt and change to the times and still work towards our shared goals for lifespan faith development. And then lastly, I'll say one of the huge things that's happening this year is that we're celebrating 125 years of First Unitarian Church of Dallas, which is a big anniversary, and it's an opportunity to celebrate the legacy of those who've created this church that we all love, and also to hope together about what's ahead and what we're creating together. And so that's going to be a big deal, and there will be lots of fun events around that I'm looking forward to being a part of. So those are the questions that I have time to address today, and there are many more that are coming from my minister colleagues, Reverend Cantor and Reverend Fitzgerald. But for today, I want to encourage you to like and subscribe to the Tiny Pulpit Talks podcast. We love hearing from you, whether it's questions or feedback or just little likes on social media. And I also want to say, if you are listening to this on the Apple Podcast app, please do leave us a review in the app, because it lets us know that you're enjoying the podcast, but it also helps people to find our podcast. Since this is still relatively new, we're still getting the word out, but we encourage you to share and review and like. And thank you so much for joining us for today's podcast.